Treasurer.
Lance Wilbur, OMB.
John Weddleton's right here, and I'm Patrick Flynn.
Oh, that's
Tim Steele.
Dick Trainer, somewhere.
Elder Breakdown.
Pete Peterson. Paul Thursday.
Any folks in the audience? Amanda was her first one. Sherry Slate.
That's how I do that, that's backing every word.
Okay, we're gonna go down to, number 3, Malloy Financial.
LV, I just want to make sure
Oh,
you know I'm on the
I'm
phone.
sorry, Mr. Bosky, thanks for joining us.
Madam Chair, I'm back.
Good to see you.
Zig Bursons is on the phone.
Who else is on the phone?
Zig.
Zig Bursons.
Hello, Zach, welcome. Okay, we're now at MIA Financial Status. Mr. Harris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, I know one of the questions that the committee had last time was on revenues, so with that, perhaps I might turn that over to Dan Moore to discuss revenues.
Okay, so for revenues, I think it's been a couple months since we last spoke. We are working on our monthly update right now. The draft will be presented to the executive group next Thursday. I can tell you verbally kind of what the draft says. So for this year, the year we're in, 2016, this is looking at things through about mid-August. The general government operating budget revenues are about $3 million, projected to be about $3 million under the budget. So the primary reason for that, I would say almost 2/3 of the reason is the cut to the PFD for this year. So we were expecting originally, about $2,200, and that individual check is now going to be $1,000 based on the governor's action. And so with that, that has a direct impact mostly on the police department. And so when you see our report, and you'll see it around mid-September. I'm not sure what your dates are for the meeting. What's the first meeting?
September 9th.
9th, okay, you should get it by the 9th. So in that one, you'll see all the different department variances. The police department will stand out. However, it's really driven by the PFD reduction, and that's totally beyond their control. So other than that, the only other departments that are showing some negative variance that is a little more significant would be development services. The activity there is down, and then marijuana. Marijuana is off to a slow start. We're ratcheting down our estimate for the year. We think we'll get maybe about 2 months of activity this year, and then next year, it'll grow, and we'll try to factor some growth into the 2017 budget for that.
Can you hold the phone one more?
Yeah, go ahead, sure, yes.
Tobacco was supposed to have a decrease. Has it gone down?
Tobacco is actually, our projection is going to be right in budget. It's $22.4 million. For next year, we're projecting that maybe a slight decrease, and part of that is just the users of tobacco continues to go down, and inflation. Our tobacco taxes, according to code, is adjusted every year for inflation. Inflation's been extremely low, so the growth factor there is going to be overtaken by the reduced consumption. And so for 2017, we're going to probably, you'll see a slight decrease from what 2016 budget
And we
was.
added the other increased factors like we did with tobacco into the other taxes we have. Like tobacco goes up according to the CPI. Do we use that across the board or just for tobacco?
It's really specific to just a few revenue sources. Tobacco is the biggest one. Property tax obviously gets adjusted by inflation, with the tax cap formula. But the other ones, there is no specific adjustment for inflation at this point.
Would you, and let us know if you think we need to look at that and add 2 other ones.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Training. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure if this is the right point to inject this request, but this spring we, as part of the first quarter budget amendments, we proposed a tax rebate. It was somewhat nebulous as to what that would look like. As we now have the impacts of state budget decisions before us, it'd be helpful, and I don't know if it can wait until our next month's meeting or needs to be prior to that, it would be helpful to see an outline as to how we expect to utilize the surplus to address most of these shortfalls for example, from garnishments, which I believe is what Mr. Moore was referring to with PFD reduction, in other areas, and then, you know, what's left over for tax rebates and or other things. So, an outline of where we are, what the intent of the administration is, and giving us some knowledge from which we can make our decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn, and I think that at our September meeting will be a great time for the administration to provide that information for us, especially considering the fact that we talked about the rebate before the end of the year, and the fact that we'll be just getting the preliminary budget, so if the administration can take a note, we'll have that on the agenda at the next meeting. Thank you. Mr. Moore, please continue.
Okay, other than that, I would say in general, the revenues are right on budget within a very, very small variance. Room tax through the first half of this year is actually slightly less than what we had expected. So we'll find out how third quarter turns out. We won't know that until end of October. Third quarter is always the biggest quarter, so that'll be interesting information. We do, Assemblymember Flynn asked me right before the meeting about Airbnb. That was an ordinance that the Assembly adopted not too long ago. And we were within about 3 or 4 weeks' time able to finalize that agreement with Airbnb, and effective on August 1st, all Airbnb rentals within Anchorage started to show a tax. So that was really good news. And so we'll see the first effect of that at the end of October. And that's really all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Rover, update on the 2016 budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on your Assembly meeting on August 23rd, you will receive our monthly July 2016 monthly expenditure report. But in summary, we're 58.2% through the year, and we are 56% of our budget is expended, so we're about 1.5% under budget for labor and non-labor. Our labor is at about 56%, and our non-labor is at about 54%. It's just some seasonality issues. So overall, the departments are managing their budgets very well, and we look to be, if these trends continue, on the positive overall for all general government. We do have a couple departments that are either behind in their labor significantly or more than 5%, and they're really related to some either contracts that they expected to be let or encumbered, and just a seasonality. We have some departments, primarily Public Works, they're a little bit hot. It's just because of the summer construction season. We expect those things to temper down, and as the projections that we're asking the departments that they've given us, they're all coming in with a few exceptions within their budget. So 2016 so far is looking very good. And I think that's all I have, unless you have some questions about 2016, Madam Chair.
I don't see any questions. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, Mr. Moore spoke to a reduction in permit fees.
Sure.
Could you speak to where we are in terms of how Development Services is doing and what adjustments, if any, are being made to address the slowdown activity?
So I can't, Mr. Flynn, I don't know the exact number of the amount of where they off on their projection. We do support Development Services with non-permit fee revenue, property tax revenue. The difference between those two, I just don't recall. But given the information that Dan mentioned, outside 181 fund, since we are reducing, we are expecting a reduction in revenues. When we sent out the budget guidance for 2017, I instructed all departments to be looking at least 0.5% savings, so we can accommodate that by reducing our spending as one option. We want to make sure that the administration has. In addition to, if we, as Mr. Flynn suggested, maybe we look at the fund balance to make up the loss of the revenue. Those decisions have not been made, but we're trying to build a case for some choices.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, just quickly follow. I mean, we have Mr. Starr isn't here to carry the water in this one, so I'll do my best. We've labored mightily to keep 181 and Development Services in balance, and failed miserably, I think, almost every year. So if we are in fact trending downward on permit applications, then we need to either rethink the model or adjust staffing levels
Exactly.
appropriately, and I think now is the time to have that consideration rather than trying to do it on the fly as we approve the budget in November. So we need a little bit of help so that we're making good decisions.
If I could just follow up.
Certainly.
So I think Mr. Flynn is on track with the same line of thinking that I am in OMB as it relates to them, as it relates for 2017. If that trend is going to continue, do we need to make some adjustments based on the service they provide and the revenues they're receiving? For 2016, we don't have an elegant solution for them right now, but that's definitely how we're looking at 17.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Training.
I saw an article where OM's gonna build a $40 million facility up at Electron Drive, and the city's gonna contribute $500,000 for infrastructure. I'd like to know exactly where that infrastructure funds are being transferred from. According to the news article, it was from overages on bonds. I'd like to know which bonds we're talking about, and want to know where the money's coming from.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Training. Okay, Mr. Wilbur, an update on the 2017 budget, and if you can repeat the comments that you made a few moments ago, that would be really great.
Repeat the
On
comment.
the 2017
Okay,
budget.
sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So, as regards to 2017, we have a proposed calendar. I gave a copy of this to the clerk. I'm going to pass copies around to the assembly members here. So every year, we put out a proposed schedule for the budget, and with that, I sent out some guidance to the department heads for 2016 and 17, and as I mentioned, for 2016, I've asked them to consider, provide a 0.5% savings on their operating budget for the remainder of this year. For 2017, I told them to begin with a continuation budget as a place to start. So with that, the proposed operating budgets submissions for 2017 are due from departments to OMB tomorrow. So far so good. Many of the departments have been have the ability to do that. Those that don't, we're working with them to provide that information. So we're well into the 2017 sort of budget season as it relates to OMB and the departments. They're also working on their capital submissions. We are receiving those as well. We're looking towards the mayor making some decisions on the operating budget around the first week of September. And before that, the mayor by code is required to send out a 120-day memo, and in that 120-day memo, hopefully we can characterize some of the requests that Mr. Flynn had about what we may be doing with fund balance and some of the challenges that we face that Mr. Moore just expressed. So we'll add that in as well. And then the only other point I want to make for the assembly that would be helpful is I worked with Rose and with Barbara in the assembly and the clerk's office, and we have scheduled a special meeting of the assembly that's not currently on your schedule. It's on October 25th. It will be a special meeting on October 25th. It's currently not on the assembly calendar. It would be just on the budget. We're going to submit it at the end of September. You'll have it on the 1st of October for introduction. We'll work through the process and look forward to assembly adoption on November 15th. So that's a general calendar. We'll obviously be giving this committee and the Budget Advisory Commission updates monthly on our progress. So if you have particular questions, happy to answer those now.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. And just so the body knows, the leadership, also known as myself and Mr. Training, agreed to the special meeting, so I hope that works for everybody, but it was really necessary that we have that special meeting. You get to say that.
I'll be on vacation.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the report from the Budget Advisory Commission, and Ms. Nelson, Mr. Wilbur?
I have one more item, if I could.
Oh, please.
So, while we didn't meet in July, I wanted to make the Assembly's Budget Finance Committee aware, every year, we do prepare a budget, and for the 5th year in a row, the municipality has been awarded recognition from the Government Finance and Office Administration on how we prepare our operating budget. It's an award that we receive, and it's based on, the information that we provide, the order that it's in, both as a communication tool, both as a policy document, and including, those key elements that are required and you're measured by your peers. And so thanks to, frankly, the staff at OMB and the budget analysts and department, we're fortunate enough to receive the award. And I just wanted you to be aware of that. A lot of hard work goes into this, a lot of information is provided, and obviously we're always looking to improvement, but I was really proud of my staff and receiving the award. So I just wanted you to make you aware of that.
Thank you. You should be very proud. Okay, and as I was saying a moment ago, there's no one here from the budget or the commission, so we'll move on to item number 5, SAP project. Report, Mr. Derry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have some additional copies if everybody didn't get one of the actual report. But I will start on page 2 here. For everybody to look at. This is as a reminder, this is our project plan, broken down by some of our key areas. You'll notice that the project plan at this point in time is colored as a yellow, which is a cautionary coloring, just making sure that we are on top of everything. You will notice there's some green and red, and that kind of averages out to the yellow as we go through. Data migration is red, which is on the first page there that I want to bring to. As we've talked about, data has been one of the areas that we've been concerned about. We've asked for some additional SAP resources that have arrived this week, and we'll be preparing a strategy document for us tomorrow. Once we have that document, we're ready to try to incorporate those suggestions and plan as we move forward in dealing with the data. And what we're really talking about is the conversion of the non-PeopleSoft and the PeopleSoft data into the SAP system. So we've coded it red right now, just given some of the concerns that we've had. I'm hopeful that once we get the report tomorrow, that it'll give us some good direction as we go forward. The core functional areas, which is the HCM and the FILO, you'll see are green. We've been running ahead of schedule, and we have a few tables at the back of the report that will show that as well. We're currently beginning the test scripts for that. Realization is shooting to end on October 21st. So the municipal employees and the consultants are working on all the different test cases to be able to, once we complete realization phase, go into the testing environment. And you'll notice that both of those areas are very strong in green, and that's our core areas right now. On the next page, if I bring your attention to OCM, that's the change management. We're yellow there, but we're still running pretty good. We're about ready to start bringing on the developers for the training classes. They have to create the training courses over the fall quarter and be ready for training the employees on those in the spring, but we're still doing pretty good. Development project plan is green at this point in time. However, it's very busy. We have a substantial number of resources actually all over the world that are currently working on the development of the system so that it can be ready for testing. SAP has been bringing on resources almost daily to be able to handle that workload, and that's a core responsibility for us to be able to meet our deadline. On page 3, testing, as I mentioned, we're just in the process of scheduling that and getting the test scenarios and so forth written up and documented, and we're on course for that particular thing. There'll be 21 weeks of testing once we get through the realization phase. This is really the preparatory phase that we're working on right now, and everything is okay. As I mentioned, the next 2 areas are data, either related or interfaces. From a data cleansing, that kind of is tied to the data conversion process that I talked about earlier. Once we get our hands on that, data cleansing is a portion of it. They're marked as red, not to say that we're behind or we're struggling, but we're marking them as concerned areas where we want to always keep vigilant on them and be able to address them. And we want to make sure everybody understands that that's an area where we're looking at to make sure that we're not lax in our responsibilities in those particular areas. And then lastly, on the very bottom of that page, which carries over to the next page, is the Muni interfaces. This is an area where we just had a big meeting this morning on that, so I'm hoping that there'll be some follow-up. We have a couple of areas where we're concerned about being behind on some of the utility interfaces, so we're going to try to address that and see if we can do some additional resources. And then third-party interfaces is all of the direct interfaces that the municipal has, such as life insurance, retirement vendors, and so forth. We've been unable to focus our efforts on that, so beginning next week, we've actually are going to be hiring a part-time consultant or contractor to come in, help out from a project management standpoint. So we've identified the person, and they'll be on site beginning next week to try to look through the 23 municipal direct interfaces that we have to deal with. So it's been an area where we've been struggling, and we're hoping with this additional resource we'll be able to catch up here on those areas, or at least identify some of the areas that we have concern. Another area we have in there is some of those contracts are up for bid right now. So we're, for example, life insurance, and we can't work on the interfaces until they determine who the vendor is going to be going forward, and our timeline continues to get shorter here. We may have to, at some point, kind of like draw a line in the sand, at least for a while, and say, these are the vendors and or interfaces that we have as of, let's say, October 1st, and try to lock those down so we don't have a continually moving target as we go forward with new vendors constantly having to go. These will become change orders, which could potentially either impact the schedule or the cost. So we are looking at trying to complete the ones that are in process, but also trying to be aware if there are some ones coming up, we're going to try to see if we can kind of mitigate the impact on the plan.
Mr. Trainee?
Well, the really big part of these companies, as they're bidding on the contract, to be SAP compliant. I don't want to keep going out every year having a whole bunch of don't interface with SAP. Are we going to put that into the purchasing paperwork? They've got to have their system conform to SAP protocol.
I think that would be something we certainly could put into there, and if it was normal purchasing. I know for the life insurance one, it's out for bid right now. The discussion is that whenever the winning vendor is determined, if it's not the current vendor, that we're going to be asking them to put their data in the same interface format that we've already had established as a starting point to try to mitigate our time cost on that. And I think it would be nice if they were put into the contracts or the RFPs to begin
Would
with.
you check with purchasing, because it's one assembly member who looks at this stuff when it comes forward. If it's not SAP compliant, none of us are under contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
So that kind of goes through our project plan. So we are moving forward on all the core areas. As I've mentioned in the past, we are always focused on data and interfaces as being an area where we have to be very vigilant on, and we're trying to continue to do that. With regards to financial status, just kind of go over that table. It's something very similar you've seen. You can see that currently budget to actual is running just under $600,000. I always caution you to think that means we're under budget. In many situations, this is where some areas have been held back or lagged from staffing perspectives. However, we are in the process of trying to look at some of those hours that haven't been used and reallocating them to some additional things that have come up. So while we may be running strong here, we're also trying to mitigate some of our potential costs in the future. So if we had an area where we were ahead, we're going to try to use those hours and use them for any kind of areas that have popped up. So I wouldn't, while we're doing well, or at least the project is doing well from a financial standpoint, I always look at this as just a target of how well the project's doing, not necessarily of available funding that is going to be available at the very end, because we do have a lot of things that come up on a continual basis, and we're able then to pay for those without having to ask for additional money if we can reallocate what we already have appropriated out there. And then I will continue to mention that we still have the $4 million number there from Muni Labor. Hopefully that number we'll be working through here with the Executive Steering Committee and actually posting some numbers to that. So at some point, the employees are keeping track of their hours and the associated costs, and we'll take a look at that number here relatively soon. If we can go to the next page, which is the top of the realization timeline, a couple points I want to bring to your attention here on this. We're towards the middle of August, which is about 2/3 of the way through the realization phase. We have, however, added a Thanksgiving and a year-end break to the calendar so that everyone knows that that's when both municipal and consulting staff will not be working. It's just difficult to be able to do that. We want to use the funds as judiciously as we possibly can. What that did by having that 3-week period there, it's added 3 weeks to the very end of the project. So all the dates and the timelines have been adjusted to be able to reflect that. And now, according to basically the new timeline, it's about May 5th is when the system would be completing its 55 weeks of development and testing, which is obviously 3 weeks later than what we've seen in the past. So we are looking at that, and we also are looking at throwing out the question of when that is done, is it possible for us to go live at that point? We've talked in the past about needing to go live on a quarter end. So we're looking at both options from a financial and from a municipal responsibility perspective at this time to see what makes most sense. But those questions are starting to be asked as we move our way through this and get more finality of where our end date is going to be. Okay, and then the bottom table on that one is one that kind of accurately reflects the project plan that I mentioned, and we're certainly ahead of schedule in many areas, especially our core areas with data and interfaces, areas that we're behind in. And then one other area I'll just bring your attention is ECM. That always comes up. I know it's of interest to you. That's the content management side. We had some issues with with getting the servers for that particular product and stream up and running. Those areas have been dealt with. However, it caused us to be several weeks delayed, and that's the main reason why they were doing it. But if you look, we almost doubled our production week over week on that. So the developers of the ECM have all the information and are working judiciously to catch up the best they possibly can on that particular stream. So things are going pretty good in that area. And then lastly, on the last page here, we kind of like to throw this one out here, which just shows how a lot of the core areas are going. In most cases, we're ahead of schedule on a lot of the tasks tracked on the project plan. HCM does a lot more individual tasks because they're creating the time management and payroll portions from scratch. So there's a lot more task assigned with that, and you can see that they are well ahead of where they're supposed to be at this point in time. And then the other thing I'll bring to your attention is the technology one is kind of behind schedule, and that goes to the volume of tasks that they've been asked to do with all these development objects, and the way SAP is handling that is they're putting additional resources on to try to catch up on them as we go through. And then, as I mentioned about interfaces, we struggle to continue to keep up with that, and I'm hoping that the big meeting that we had today with all the directors of the different utilities and Muni will help with trying to move those things forward a little bit more. Hopefully we'll be in a more positive position next month when we get the report on the interfaces. Take any questions?
I don't see any questions here. Mr. Bosky, do you have any questions? Mr. Bosky?
Sorry, my phone was on mute.
Go ahead.
No, I don't have any questions right now.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you for
Bosky.
asking.
Zig, do you have any comments you want to make before we move forward?
No, I'm good. I'm just gonna listen.
No, I know you're good, but I was asking Zig if he had any questions before we move forward.
Not at this time.
Okay, and Zig, we're about to talk about whether or not we want to continue your contract. So this is a public meeting, but I think it probably would be appropriate that you say goodbye to us. Zig?
Yeah, say that again.
Okay, we're about to discuss, even though this is a public meeting, we're about to discuss whether or not we want to continue your contract. So I would ask you to say goodbye.
Hang up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, what I'm asking you is to hang up.
Oh, hang up. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm trying to be polite. Yeah,
I'll
so-
be happy.
Step off and say
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I think it's appropriate if we had this conversation, even though it's a public meeting, but without you on the line.
Yeah, I'll be happy to hang up if you want me to hang up. That's
Okay,
fine.
great, and we will talk to you later.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay. We are now at item number 6, continuation of Zico Consulting contract. Just so everybody knows, the original contract amount was $200,000. We've had this contract for a couple of years now, and it's worked really well. Zig has done a really, really great job. He started under the prior administration. The contract ends, I believe it's September, and after the September payment, I think we pay him $8,000 a month. It'll be like $4,800 left. And so the big question is, do we want to appropriate more money to continue his contract? Chairman Trainee and I had a side conversation, and we feel that at this point in time, that it's not necessary to spend those tax dollars. And the reason why we feel that way is because we have our Budget Finance Committee that is now the committee of the whole. We also have on our agenda every single meeting an update from the administration, and we feel comfortable, and hopefully everybody else does, that the administration is providing us with the information that we
You know, I actually agree with those too, and I think one thing when he gives his reports, it's interesting, but I've never really understood what is actionable from our side. You know, if a task is behind, now we know, but what do we do about it? We tell all to work harder. Well, we can do that without paying more money.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Mr. Training?
I think we brought him online, we needed his expertise, but we're beyond that now. This administration is fully embraced and take responsibility to make an SAP go forward. And I just don't think we need to spend the money. Given where our budget's at now, given what we heard today on the money we're not gonna have for the police department, we need to save every penny we possibly can. So I think this is just something we don't need now. Administration's carrying this program forward. We're gonna hold them accountable for the 5th of May, is it? It will be a whole different discussion on the 5th of May if that thing is not live and active.
That's our
You
current.
might not want to be here.
That's our current end of project day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Training. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, without this, I guess my question to administration is, without this contract, are we still going to have the motivation and drive to keep up with it? I believe we will, but do you see anything coming down the pipe that's gonna? This was really a feel good for us. Well, it was more than that. It was to save a flailing project. And I have to give this administration huge kudos for getting us back on. But I think we can safely not renew the contract and still have great service from the administration and make budgets.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Bosky?
Thank you. Can somebody remind me to date what has been the project cost?
Can you speak up a little bit louder, Mr. Bosky?
Sure. Can somebody remind me to date what are we at for the project cost?
Mr. Stern?
Oh, I have those numbers, but I do not have them with me at this point in time.
Okay, give me an estimate, Alden.
I think we're about $50 million spent as we speak right now, either through muni labor and or consulting labor since 2011 when the project started. About $50 million in spent money. The rest of it's either encumbered and is going to be spent in the future.
And remind me, what is our weekly and or monthly burn rate?
Okay, the weekly burn rate is really rocketed up here recently because we're putting all these resources for development, but I would say we're approximately $400,000 a week burn rate right now. And then once we get development finished, then that number will start dropping again as we get into the testing area.
Okay. And I don't want to, interrupt the Kumbaya moment we have going on right now with the administration, because I think this was probably the biggest issue you guys inherited, and I think there has been definite positive moves made, but I think it's helpful for assembly members to step back and remember that the reason we hired this consultant, and I was right there pushing with Elvie to hire an independent consultant for the assembly, because the assembly wanted independent information coming, not from an administration. And to me, I don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat, I think that's our role. Now, when it goes back to what value has he given, I heard Mr. Weddleton's comment, but I think back to one or two presentations ago when Zig was talking about communication, and he was talking about different structures within the administration that they could be more effective. And in fact, they took up many of his comments and implemented them. So I think he's been a very big value, not only to the assembly, but to the administration, to have an independent, kind of outside perspective, someone we have to remember who has done this significantly well in other communities that have had, frankly, disasters with SAP implementation. And he's been able to go in and help facilitate the solution. So I think his value is much more than just, what his reports look like. I think it really is an expertise. And when we're talking about, you know, a 50, probably by the time we're done, an $80 million project, and we're talking about a burn rate of $400,000 a week right now, if for the people of Anchorage to know that there's an independent somebody looking over this project, which has been an absolute boondoggle, I think it's not only been demonstrated that it's been valuable, but I think it gives the taxpayers and the people of Anchorage, and frankly the Assembly, a little bit more control and oversight to make sure that we're crossing our T's and we're dotting our I's. This is a team effort, but I think this independent analysis, especially with somebody with the service and the record and the experience that SIG has, I think it's valuable. What I don't want to see is the contract to go away, and then in 10 months after the project slips, and it slips again, and it slips again, then we would go back and say, oh, it's wrong. Now let's get another analysis. I think I'd rather be proactive, and considering the amount of money we're spending, $8,000 a month, to see some of the value ZIG has added to this project, to me, is money well spent. So I do still support continuing the project for that reason.
Thank you, Ms. Tabowski. You make some really good points, and I don't think any of us here, well, especially those of us who have been around for a while, think that it was useless to hire ZIG. As a matter of fact, as you know, Mr. Train and I tried to do it, and the Assembly didn't approve it, and then we tried again with the document you brought forward, and then it was approved. And I'm really, really happy that that happened, and it's been really great having somebody on board. Before I go to Mike, because I want to get some Mike's opinion also, because Mike has been on our behalf the contract manager for this contract. But Mr. Stern, are there, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there audits built into the contract?
We have SAP QA audits that are done by the SAP independent auditing entity of the group. They will be doing some audits here at the end of realization, both on data, on functionality, and then as we get into the different testing cycles as well, they'll be performing some audits, and then that information comes back. We look at those audits from an administration perspective, and then we put down what the findings are, and we make recommendations to how to resolve those issues. So yes, there is independent, within SAP, audits that are performed throughout the project.
Thank you, Mr. Stern. Mr. Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as one point of clarification, there is sufficient funding right now to carry the contract through the end of October. Okay.
Thank you.
If you would have asked me this same question in April, right after we started realization, and things looked, we didn't know what to expect with realization, I would have thought, well, perhaps we don't need to have a contractor. But as things have progressed, I'm finding that ZIG is pointing out things such as data cleansing interfaces and other various issues that have proven useful as realization has progressed along. And I think he brought those things up in his last presentation last month. So as realization's moving along, and some things are moving along and some things are slipping, he's able to point those things out as the project has progressed, which weren't readily evident at the beginning of realization.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Any other comments? Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're looking at extending the contract for approximately 6 months, so we're looking at $50,000 somewhere in there, just so we know what kind of money we're talking about here. And you know, I've been going to all the SAP meetings from the beginning. I still don't consider myself to have enough knowledge to know what's really taking place here. I'm not a computer guy. I think having ZIG's expertise might save us more than $50,000 in the last 6 months. So sometimes, it's better not to be pound wise and penny wise and pound foolish, I think is the phrase. So I think I sort of agree with Ms. Tabowski on this.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Well, as a committee, we can't vote, but we can make recommendations. And the bottom line is, if this committee whatever this committee recommends, it's still up to the assembly. Okay, and, so if there's anybody, would anybody like to make a recommendation?
I would make a recommendation that we, you know, it's kind of weird. LB, you can guide me on this. I'm not sure because this is a committee of the whole.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Amy. Amanda,
Oh,
can you
sorry.
can
you hear me
wait
now?
1 second, Amy, because we can't hear you.
It's as loud as it goes.
Close to the phone, English. You can say this, but speak up.
Amy?
Can you hear me now?
It's a little better now, yeah.
Sounds like a commercial, Amy. Can you hear
I
me
was just going to
now?
ask you, Madam Chair, this is different than some of our other committees. So it's a committee of the whole, and I kind of feel a little weird making a recommendation as a committee of the whole to the assembly as a whole. Is that I can do it and see where it goes, but I'm just not sure about it.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. I understand exactly where you're coming from because it is a committee of the whole, but we're all not here. There's what?
Oh, I see what you're
There's
saying.
only 6 of us here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if I would like to, you know, I don't know if I want to. I personally support the motion, but my recommendation. This will be my motion. My recommendation will be that Zig's contract is forwarded, you know, basically to the whole assembly for discussion and consideration.
I didn't realize. Can you repeat that, Mr. Bosky, please? I'm
Sure. My position is, you know, I'm going to make the motion that the Budget and Finance Committee recommends the ZIG contract be forwarded to the whole committee for discussion and consideration for extension.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Steele?
I recommend a recommendation of another quarter at least, and see where we are at that point. If ZIG is amended.
Another quarter, so you're saying to
4 months.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, and so,
There's 3 months, isn't it?
Whatever.
yeah, quarter.
I'll approve that.
Okay, so considering who's here, again, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Amy's on the phone, so there's 6 of us here. And so does anybody, Mr.
I just want to clarify, so is that through the end of January then? 3 more months out, because we got through September, so.
We got through October right now.
Oh, through the end
Through
of
October.
Oh, so
So January,
January,
February.
December, so 3 more months, so
Yeah.
through the end of January?
Yeah. Does that take us to on the operations here?
So my question now is, the recommendation was made and it was a motion, and it's okay to make motions, and it was seconded. And my question is, does anybody object to that recommendation? Okay, and nobody objects to that recommendation, so Mr. Bosky, for your benefit and everybody else is here, what we'll do now at this point is we will prepare, or have paperwork prepared to extend the contract for an additional 3 months. And it'll be before the body, and everybody will have an opportunity to vote yes or no when it's before us.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Bosky. Okay, any other comments before we move on? All right, audience participation.